The economy in focus today. In just under 30 minutes, we're going to be getting new producer inflation data. Also, the Fed kicking off its latest two-day policy meeting. A lot of investors expecting the central bank to accelerate the tapering of its bond purchases. They're also waiting for any new clues about when the Fed will actually hike interest rates. Joining us right now to talk about all of this is Senator Pat Toomey, who's the lead Republican on the Banking Committee. And by the way, he's also going to be hearing testimony later this morning on the uses and risks of stablecoins, and we'll get to that in just a moment. But, Senator, first, let's start with the inflation and the Fed, because last week, with the consumer prices, we got the hottest level that we've seen in nearly 40 years. What's your anticipation for this number, and what can we do about it?
Well, you know, I think the Fed has gotten itself way behind the curve. My own view is the tapering should have started a year ago. But at least now it looks pretty clear that they are changing the direction of this ship, and hopefully we'll find out later this week that there's an agreement to accelerate the tapering, as everybody expects. And I think the dot plot's going to look a little different than it did last time. And so I'm hoping that we're going to accelerate a normalization. And as you know very well, and your viewers know, tapering is not a contractionary monetary policy. It's just slowing down the rate at which we continue this expansionary monetary policy. So it's long overdue. I'm glad to see that the Fed is shifting course.
We've already had several guests this week calling for the Fed, instead of raising rates as quickly, to maybe shrink the balance sheet instead. Just pointing out that all that liquidity definitely has had some impact with elevating prices, and maybe that's the better way to do it. What do you think about that?
Yeah, look, I think that's a very important topic for discussion. I hope that that is on the table for a discussion. What is the pace at which and when do they begin to shrink the balance sheet? My guess is, since we haven't gotten much indication from the FOMC about that being imminent, that they're probably, they're letting us know to expect an increase in interest rates before they move on to that step. But they certainly should be having that discussion and come up with a paradigm, a framework by which they will eventually normalize the balance sheet.
The Fed is supposed to be out of politics, not in the business of listening to what you or any other senator or congressman thinks on this. But I do wonder what the pressures they may be feeling. And they're people, too. They've got to be hearing some of these things, not just what you're saying, but probably what people like Elizabeth Warren are saying, too. And those who would not like to see them taper, those who would like to make sure that they are continuing to make money freely available. What do you hear kind of between the two sides in terms of where maybe the bigger pressure is coming from the administration, from the Senate, from the House?
So, I think Congress does have a role, and it's an oversight role, right? What I think of my job is to ensure that the Fed is actually executing its mandate, not some other mandate, not other issue areas that someone might find interesting. And in my view, I think there's a role for me and for my colleagues who share this view that you really only can maximize employment if you have reasonably stable prices, right? That is an anchor. And so I think it's important to drive that message. The Fed is certainly independent. I don't claim to be an expert on whether we should have a 50 basis point or a 25 basis point increment on any given day. But I think it's pretty clear we've maintained emergency policies long after the emergency passed. The Fed is really allocating credit in the form of purchasing mortgage-backed securities even to this day. What do we have? We have this massive rally in housing prices, and yet here's the Fed continuing to subsidize the purchase of houses. So I think it's perfectly appropriate for Congress to remind the Fed of what their mission is and when they're straying from it.
Senator, given your views about this Fed in particular, do you support and will you seek to block, to the extent that you could, the renomination of Jay Powell, and also your views on Brainerd?
Yeah, so I've said, Andrew, publicly, repeatedly, I'll be supporting Chairman Powell's renomination. I have disagreed with him sharply on monetary policy. I think he has changed his view. I think he's acknowledged that the Fed has gotten this wrong, and they're moving in a much better direction now. I also think he has had a very thoughtful and sensible approach to regulation. I also think that we might very well see developments in the direction of a central bank digital dollar. And I think Chairman Powell has really good instincts and will lead the Fed in a good direction should the Fed pursue that, which should be pursuant to legislation. And all of that is to say there's another consideration, Andrew, which is I've got to ask myself, is this a referendum or is this a choice? I think it's, from my point of view, pretty clearly became a choice, and I have a lot of respect for Lael Brainerd, but I have even bigger differences with her than I do with Chairman Powell. So I'm going to be supporting Chairman Powell.
And are you going to be supporting Lael Brainerd?
That is an open question. I'm looking forward to sitting down with her and discussing the range of issues that we need to cover.
Senator, I want to. I don't know. I don't need support, but I'm still thinking about a discussion we had earlier. So, when you think about how much money we're able to spend here, the federal government, it'd be nice if we didn't have any debt service, wouldn't it? How much could we spend on social? What do we spend percentage servicing the debt, and what does that leave to spend on really good social programs like education and health care and everything else?
Yeah, well, so first of all, Joe, I gotta back you up one step because honestly, I think some of these programs would be a bad idea if the money were free. The idea that we're going to throw thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars at American families who have plenty of income, who have income that's multiples of the median income, we're gonna give them free programs and free money because they have a child, and what is that really accomplishing other than undermining a sense of personal responsibility and independence?
But if rates went up, Senator, if rates went up,
right,
and debt service goes up, and we still want to maintain social services to the extent that we do, don't we need to raise taxes to get money for those much-needed programs because we're spending so much more on the debt service? As a result, taxes go up, and as we see in Europe, if taxes get to the point to support all these entitlement programs, your GDP is affected. That
totally.
Way. It's 40% lower. So how could anyone argue otherwise?
No, you can't credibly unless you want the Fed to just monetize it, and then of course you'll get inflation,
then you got
and that will erode the standard of living.
Then you got to raise rates, and that'll hurt the economy.
That's right. There is no free lunch. Milton Friedman reminded us of this, and it's still true. So you're absolutely right. As long as interest rates are at zero, you can be lulled into this complacency and think that you can run up a lot of debt. Some people think all this spending is a great thing. Well, as you point out, even if you do think it's a good thing, how about the damage you're going to do to the economy when you inevitably have to raise taxes massively?
The other issue is maybe that's another reason for shrinking the balance sheet first. I mean, that would allow you to sort of, get a little bit of a free lunch there if you're doing that instead of raising rates and making the debt more expensive.
Yeah, although I don't know how the markets would react to that. How does the long end of the curve react? Right. Well, except that the markets pretty much anticipate at least a gradual normalization of interest rates, and the reaction has been relatively benign in the Treasury market. If the surprise came out that we're going to have a relatively rapid decline in the size of the balance sheet, I don't know how that would go.
I just want to talk about stablecoins very quickly.
Sure.
You're going to be hearing about stablecoins today, and this is important because you are concerned that the administration at this point is perhaps taking some measures or advocating taking some measures that would impinge on stablecoins, on their growth, on their ability to innovate at this point. What do you think's happening?
Exactly
what are you
right,
hear
Becky.
today?
Well, so first, I want to say this is a really exciting new technology. It creates opportunities and possibilities for faster payments, for over time, I think, for virtually free payments. There's the programmability, which is, I think, going to be a very, very exciting innovation in finance. So what I want to do is make sure we don't do anything to stifle this tremendous technology. The President's Working Group came out with a report that you may be aware of, and they recommend that all stablecoin issuers must be insured depository institutions. That doesn't make a lot of sense to me for a lot of reasons, because especially most fundamentally, stablecoin issuers in many important ways do not look like banks and so should not be subject to bank regulation. So I'm going to release later today a set of principles that I would like to see as the guideline for the legislation we should develop. We're going to hear today from experts and participants in the market. And I hope we're going to end up with a sensible, thoughtful regulatory regime that allows this innovation to thrive.
Real quick, Senator, the other thing. So Joe Manchin Poor guy. I feel bad for him because he's going to be a man without a country or a pariah. So let's say he does say, okay, I can do something at $1.75 trillion. Is he going to look the other way with the financial mumbo jumbo that they do? How can you get this $5 trillion bill? Because we know that they're 10-year programs. It's not a one-year deal paid for with 10 years of taxes. So how's it going to get? What's it going to look like for him to sign on if he doesn't do like a Mark Warner and say, oh, I accept the CBO estimates and it's 1.75? If they don't cheat, you can't get there. So what's he going to do?
So Joe Manchin, to his credit, many months ago, said, hey, I'm a little concerned about the inflation that we've already baked in this cake. And what has happened in the meantime? Joe Manchin has been vindicated. Inflation is even worse than we expected or than many people expected. It's here. It's bad. And by the way, what I call Bernie's budget buster, this bill is really Bernie's bill. It's $5 trillion of new spending over 10 years, which is their intention. It's $3 trillion of new deficits. Of course, it's going to make inflation worse. I think the sensible, consistent thing for Joe Manchin to do is say, there's no way we should move this for several months until we see how inflation plays out.
I just want to, because he's, now he's signaling, I'm okay with 1.75. I'm wondering whether he's going to fold and say, okay, it's 1.75 trillion when he knows full well that it's not.
It's much more.
I bet you. Huh?
It's much more, but he's been right about inflation.
No, I know, but he's also a Democrat. He's not switching parties, so he'll get on board. Thank you, Senator Toomey. Coming up,